Hello, everyone. We're just giving people some time to join, and we'll get started soon. Hello, to the people who are joining now. We'll get started in a bit. One more minute. Hello. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation about efficiency in HR with the power of AI. We're very excited to talk about this. We're very passionate about that. I think all of us here in the room are very passionate about the subject. My name is Leticia. I lead product marketing here at Pipefy. Big part of my job is to really understand our target personas, like the people who we are selling Pipefy to, and really understand the type of pain points we're solving for them, which is why I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation, because AI is a big part of what we are working on now. So I'm really excited to hear from Jason and Craig about what they're seeing and their vision about this subject. It's gonna help me a lot. I'm sure it's gonna help the people who are joining us as well. So thank you both for joining us. So everybody knows what to expect before we get started, before we jump into the panel. There is a Q&A tool here on Zoom that everyone can use. So as we're having this conversation, if there's something that you want to ask our panelists, if there's something that you're curious about, something you want to bring to the table, feel free to send those questions on the Q&A tool that you can see in the bar down there. That's where we're going to be looking at those, and that's where we're going to pick some questions to be answered at the end of the webinar, or throughout the webinar in case it makes sense for us to pull some of those questions as the conversation evolves. Also, feel very free to use the chat in case you want to react to something or ask something as well, or communicate with us. We're going to be taking a look at that as well. And we are recording the session. After this, we will send the recording to everyone who's here. We're also going to upload this on our website so that you can refer back to this content whenever you want to, okay? We are going to introduce our panelists now. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about why we wanted to have this discussion and why Pipefy wanted to put this event together. Then we're going to have the panel with Craig and Jason, and at the end, we're going to have some time to answer your questions as well. So starting with Craig, welcome, Craig, and thank you so much for joining us. Craig is CEO at Talent Net Media, and he just published his book, Hiring Humans, last September. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Leticia. It's great to be here, and welcome, everyone. We're going to have a rollicking conversation today about AI and creating efficiencies for HR, and we're very excited to be here with Pipefy. Thanks very much for having us.
for being on board. We also have Jason joining us from beautiful Auckland, and Jason is the CEO at Spokephone.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Kisha. I spent a lot of time in HR tech and have moved into telecommunications, so interested to hear Craig's views on how HR tech and AI is going to fit into the world of HR technology, and hopefully shed some light on how we at Spokephone are thinking about bridging that technology over to the human aspect of HR.
Gonna be a good chat. Everyone, just to give you some context of why this subject is so special to us and why we wanted to discuss it, and give you some context on why Pipefy cares about this. For those who don't know, Pipefy is a business process automation platform focused on basically let's take this to the context of HR, right? So it basically focuses on consolidating all of those different input sources that companies use to open requests. So let's say in the case of HR, when someone wants to request PTO, or they want to know something about their benefits, or they need someone to be onboarded on their team, or they need to open a new position on their team, all those types of requests, they typically get to HR through multiple different channels, right? So you have phone calls, you have WhatsApp, you have Teams, Slack, emails, spreadsheet, even like a conversation in the hallway or something. So what Pipefy does is that it centralizes and standardizes all of those different channels, and it helps teams work through those requests as well, like standardizing the way that they're processed, getting everyone that needs to get involved for approvals, integrating with other tools to send and retrieve information. So basically acting as this orchestrator for those things that usually happen on emails and spreadsheets, where a lot of those things can get lost. And the reason why we're so excited to talk about HR is because HR can obviously help a lot with this, right? So we are working on our own HR capabilities as well. This is something that we have in beta now, and we're crazy excited about, which is the ability for HR teams to build their own chatbots, their own intelligent agents, to basically help employees get what they need, right? So all of those questions that HR analysts have to answer every single day, like, hey, how many PTO days I have left? How do I request this? Who do I talk to about this? What's the policy for that? All of that you can just outsource to an intelligent agent. That agent can also open the requests, track the requests, make sure that those employees are up to date on the status of the requests. So the idea here is really to just unload a lot of the manual, repetitive work that HR teams face every day. And when we're talking about the HR teams themselves, it's really cool because they can also create all of those processes through the HR. So you can basically describe the process that you need and it will build it for you. And it can also help you retrieve data and insights from your process. So understanding, I don't know, like, why is it taking so long for me to get new benefit approvals every time? Like, where does that get stuck? Like, how do I improve these? So AI can help with that as well. So that being said, and I guess explaining why we're so excited to have this conversation, I wanted to invite Jason and Craig to discuss this a little bit further, and for us to talk about how AI can unlock this efficiency for HR teams. So starting, I was just talking about the way that we at Pipefy are thinking about this, right? How we are applying this technology here. And we do see a lot of teams besides HR. So we see procurement teams, marketing teams, sales teams, really looking at this type of technology to increase their efficiency. And we also see this growing interest in HR, right? With a lot of possibilities, a lot of things that can be done. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. What is it that you are hearing in your conversations? What are people going to you for, like, in terms of advice, and how do I use this? Like where do I get started? What do you think are the most relevant use cases for AI in the context of HR?
So I'll start, and I'm probably just going to start with every question so that Jason can be the brilliant responder. So one of the things that I find fascinating about what Pipefy does, and what we've kind of seen AI evolve from, in the HR space, which was sort of very simple chatbots to now um, decision trees that learn and grow and understand better and make things easier for employees. So what we were describing moments ago with Pipefy, which is answering HR questions, is pretty much decision tree stuff, right? That's if you ask this, then the answer is that. And if you ask or answer A, B in response, then the answer becomes a little more specific. But imagine taking an entire employee handbook and feeding it to your AI copilot and saying, answer any questions based on this handbook, right? So AI can do that in seconds, right? And that's one of the things that I see as being amazing. Training manuals that used to take people days to create videos about or decipher can now be summed up, right, in a few minutes. And things like questions about global immigration and complicated things that have pretty specific legal aspects to them that need to be updated on a regular basis could be tackled by processes like this as well. And so the summing up of data, in addition to kind of the spot technology solutions that we see, like scheduling interviews and onboarding, things like that. But the summing up of data and making things concise and understandable quickly and clearly and efficiently is really going to be one of the biggest game changers for people departments in this year. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I think everyone, when they think about AI, jumps immediately to the kind of jobs they don't need to do, right? It's going to take care of the low end sort of repetitive functions. And I think if you read through all of the AI commentary, it's pretty much well understood that kind of low value repetitive functionality is going to eventually fall away to AI. But some of you in HR tech that may have implemented some of these things in the past, there's a fundamental difference between AI and ML and these other things that we used to have. In the past, you had to set up your decision tree yourself, right? So you said, if this, do that, do this, and it ends up being this convoluted thing that really breaks frequently. But AI is totally different, as Craig explained. You're not training it in that way. You're saying, here is the content, you make the decision on how you respond. So I think what we don't understand yet is actually how far that can go. And when we took at this kind of question here about those kind of basic low-level use cases in HR, I think that's going to go very quickly. Interesting to me is what actually happens in the rest of the HR department as it relates to people. What are the benefits to people? How are we going to raise up people's career opportunities, right? How are we going to use AI in this change of the human condition? The things that we're focused here on with Pipefy and SpokePhone is that the starting of these requests by voice or by text or by WhatsApp and the interaction of that data over those channels. And the thing that we're trying to figure out at SpokePhone right now is that AI is currently being used to deflect conversations, right? I want to call up my HR associate and ask them about how many days of leave I have. Well, AI can deflect that conversation from occurring because it can find that information or that immigration status or that information they're looking for. The real challenge is going to be, when do I reflect that conversation to a human? When does AI stop and when do humans start? And I think that is true across all aspects of HR, because one of the topics that someone's bound to put a question in the chat box soon is about resume filtering and those kinds of things. So we're seeing, at least from SpokePhone's perspective, a lot of energy focused on, when AI stops, how do we bring humans into that loop? And it's a really interesting question when it comes to the journey of a candidate through to a retained employee.
Yeah, so early on, when we started working with chatbots on career sites, they didn't have very many answers, right? So I installed one of the first enterprise level chatbots on a career site in 2017 when I was doing a project with Allegis for DXC technology. So they decided, yeah, we want to be modern. We're going to be forward thinking. We're going to have a chatbot on our career site to answer some questions about our merger. This is a big merger with HP Enterprise, and what are our benefits like? What's different about us? Tell us about the culture. And nobody really wanted to ask most of those questions. They didn't think the chatbot was going to have very good answers, and they asked very quickly things like speak to a recruiter. And so, yeah, one of the first things that we had to do was to activate a circumstance where a link would come up to kind of do a round robin link out to a recruiter somehow, where the recruiter could answer back or get back to that person by email. And which is fine, because at least at that point, the person is engaged and you can then have a human conversation. And a lot of what I wrote about in the book, Hiring Humans, which you can, by the way, get on Amazon, and you can find it at hiring-humans.com, is how to keep that relationship with the humans in your organization going with the future humans of your organization, right? Our future coworkers are the people applying to these jobs. So you don't want to automate yourself out of an opportunity to have a good relationship with those future coworkers of ours. And so, like Jason said, the option to opt out to speak to someone is important. And we have to remember that not everything should be an automated process, right? We're in the relationship business when we're talking about recruiting and employee relations, even sales and customer service. And so, you might know that it's very difficult to get someone on the phone at Amazon, right? If you're trying to get some customer support at Amazon, it's a maze to try to get there. You should make it easy. It should be like your opt out of this email button on your campaigns that you're sending to clients and candidates. If they don't want to be emailed by you, they should be able to opt out quickly. They should also be able to opt in real quickly to speak to a human if possible.
Craig, I'm curious, you mentioned, right, when you were working on that project 2017, and that people were not like as comfortable like with the whole chatbot experience. There was not a lot of trust there. How do you guys see that now that there's this much bigger hype around AI and people are growing like more used to that? Do you feel that in the context of HR, employees are more likely to be like open to that type of experience when it comes to even like maybe more like simpler interactions with HR?
So I think it's about the same, but for different reasons. I did a survey back in 2017, and we asked, I don't know, 200 or 300 job candidates how they felt about interacting with a chatbot to get some of the front end stuff out of the way, interview scheduling and maybe assessments and things like that with a chatbot. And, 80% or so of the respondents said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. But 20% still said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to speak to someone about that. I don't want to deal with a chatbot. And at the time, I think it was reluctance because chatbots didn't give very good answers. Now, I think it's probably come full circle to where I'm not sure I want to put my information into a chatbot. How open is that information and how secure is it?
Yeah.
I think when we think about AI, and if you think about AI for your company, I think there's a really good benchmark to put as a non-functional requirement of your AI project. And that benchmark would be, we will be successful with our AI chatbot for HR or whatever you're building when people prefer to use the bot rather than talking to a human, right? And I'll give you an example. If you've ever booked a hotel room on Expedia, you can cancel it through their bot with one click. It's a liberating experience, right? You say cancel and it says, do you want to cancel this? You go, yes, it says done. If you can think about those kind of jobs in your business where people prefer to use your bot, you've kind of won at that challenge. And I think also using the word chatbots, we're going to have to come up with some other name, because the chatbot has been kind of tarnished with this horrible asking questions and wrote answers, because the people that wrote the decision tree really didn't understand what people wanted to ask.
Right.
So, we've got some hurdles to overcome there. And I think the other thing too, Craig, is that we're all quite into this space. The average candidate's not, the average employee's not. All right. I mean, I showed my wife the other night, she was applying for a job, and I said, let me get AI to write you a cover letter. And I gave it her resume and said, write a cover letter for a retail position in high fashion clothing. And she was flabbergasted, like, never seen AI work before. And I said, well, do you want to work in for Rocket Lab building rockets? I said, write a cover letter for being a rocket scientist or rocket. I was like, so for most people, AI is still just a thing they hear about. They have no concept of what it can do, which is a good thing, right? Because we can then surprise and delight through careful use of these in the right situations for the right applications. And obviously a lot of that during onboarding, that kind of rote question and answer, a lot of that, during the life cycle of an employee. But I think we're going to talk about some benefits in the next question. And that's really, really perhaps get into the meat of that conversation.
Yeah, that's perfect. That actually leads me to what I'm going to ask you next, which is we have been discussing a lot like this most immediate benefits of adopting HR technology in HR, right? So we've been talking a lot about how teams can get more productive, how employees can get a much better experience and all of that. But thinking longer term, what is it that you guys can see that team, like what type of benefit can teams reap out of like implementing AI in HR?
Yeah. So a few things. First of all, polite conversation is going to be wildly improved by AI. If you think about, if you use ChatGPT or any other AI now to kind of generate messages or emails or blog posts or social posts, you almost have to tone it down because they're such good conversationalists, and they're almost a little flowery, going quite beyond what you would normally write. But still, it's a better start for most conversations than you would, normally take 5 seconds to generate. So I think things like regular employee check-ins during their life cycle, onboarding, certainly candidate messaging, which is a big feature in many of the tools that we're currently seeing in HR technology. These things are definitely a big plus. And then the predictive analytics that will come with AI is going to be a big player. So companies like Eightfold are already attempting to see the future and help with internal mobility. So when an employee comes into your organization, you have a resume, a profile, but you don't really get an updated profile and resume from that employee after they enter your company. So how do you know 3 years down the road, really what they're ready for? We do our best with surveys and, our regular quarterly check-ins with our managers to say, here's what we want and here's what we desire. But how do we really know, what skills they're developing and what certifications they should have and things like that by a certain point, and be able to compare them to the jobs that we have and will have and the needs that we will have? And I think AI will do a very good job of helping us see that future and understand, where should an employee be? What skills would they have picked up doing this job? And what do they match that currently we're advertising to the outside world, where it could be an internal employee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is going to be really interesting. AI is very good at what they call long-running conversations, right? Which are things that occur over time. So the ability to look at hundreds of phone calls, for instance, and summarize the journey that a customer had in the buying cycle with you. The same can be said for a candidate's progression through your company. I think the quality of life things, if you think about the fact that a lot of these jobs that your HR team may do maybe kind of subjugated to AI, it leaves time for other things, right? And those other things are typically of higher value or more complex of nature. So they're doing more interesting things, your HR team. So there's impact to the team in HR, but that impact also flows to the employees, because across every part of your business, the kind of repetitive low-value functions are going to get eaten away by AI, which gives the HR department an ability to start thinking about quality of life across the company. So not just can AI save me time, it's really what is it going to do for the HR function supporting people in their transition through career, which, you know, Eightfold are sort of thinking about. And the other thing, if you thought about that and you run it right through, well, there are obviously upskilling and training opportunities. For instance, AI could look at every email that you send, right? I could listen to every phone call that you do and help with training and identifying areas of performance improvement, 360-degree feedback. There's all kinds of things I think that everyone focuses on how much money can I save with AI, right? The really interesting thing is how do we change the impact of what we do to customers, and from an HR perspective, how HR supports the employees and the business in making decisions. I think that's where the really interesting side of the long-term benefits in AI come. The other thing too is going to be the low-skilled and unemployed. In the early days, you know, we've all got LinkedIn for people who have skill, right? It's pretty easy to see career transition, but people that don't have discernible skill that work in sort of these other roles, how can you crosswalk them, right, across skills and competencies? It's quite hard to do, and own it, you know, try to do a decent job of the structure, but the structure is rigid, and with AI, structure doesn't need to be rigid. So is that going to open us up opportunities for career progression for people, you know, that, and I just realized the sun's shining through my window here on my face. I think those are the really interesting things to me is, yeah, we're going to save a bunch of time if we can get our AI to be so good that people prefer talking to that for low value, repetitive things. That's a great outcome. But the future for me is really those, how can you change the human condition for people inside the business and people wanting to get inside the business and move up to their career? I think that's really where the long-term view of AI and HR needs to be focused on, aside from saving time and money. I'm just going to close the box.
So Jason's about talking about quality of life things there, right? Which I think is a big deal. So how can we hire people? How can we hire people more accurately? And how can we keep them longer and happier in the organization, right? So the quality of life starts with being able to follow through on the job promise up front and getting people to be able to opt in better by writing better messages, writing better job descriptions, doing a better job of nurturing them during the process. And then, yeah, how do we keep them engaged and actively improving, right, throughout their career journey? One of the tools that I see that's interesting for this is called Hone It. So Hone It is, they currently will record conversations from job interviews and maybe hiring manager intakes. Okay. And then they will give you a score over time about how good those conversations are. Is there bias in certain conversations? And also will give you relevant snippets to share back and forth between job candidate and hiring manager, right? Automatically, it'll say, look, this is interesting. And this snippet might be interesting to this job candidate. What they're thinking about is, how do they then take that and record conversations throughout a candidate's life cycle with their manager, with HR, with, right? And not Big Brother listening, but, you know, actively recording and saying, hey, this is what you said 3 months ago or 6 months ago. Did this happen for you? And how do we make sure we're on the right track? And so I think there's something to that. I think that can really, I mean, it should be able to happen quickly.
So I think there's two other points in here. One specifically to that conversation or long-running conversation. When people talk on the phone, they're usually a lot less structured with email. So conversations flow naturally, right? And people, what we're working on at Spoke Phone are 3 things in this area. And the first is when I talk to someone, when they call, right? So imagine a candidate or an employee calling you. Let's surface information to help you understand who that person is and what journey they've been on. Right? That's the first piece, get to know that person. And we're doing it right inside the phone call. So you're able to, when the call comes in, see that information. But the second is what we like to call, how do you help people have a good day every day. So in your business, you've got good performers and you've got average performers. The goal is to try and get the average performers to be a good performer every day, right? More consistently. So the second part of that journey is, first of all, let's tell you who's on the call or who's chatting with you and what their journey has been, so you can be more contextual and be more relevant to them. But the second part is, help me have a better conversation. Whilst the conversation is occurring, inject things that I should be saying, asking, or capturing during the conversation, right? That's that recommendation. And the final part of it is summarization, which is, once the call or the conversation's over, summarize the things that occurred in this call in multiple ways. The first way might be summarize it for my CRM notes or my bullhorn notes in my recruiting platform or ATS. The next summarization might be for compliance. The next summarization might be for opportunity and crosswalk. There's multiple summarizations you can do at the end of calls. We're playing with these right now in SpokePhone to help obviously drive productivity and time, but it's also about outcomes, right? And over a long period of time, with a lot of candidates, a lot of questions, you can summarize those outcomes, right? Which AI is very good at doing, and start looking for trends. And the other thing I think with those trends, another really interesting application for AI in HR is going to be team building, which is, if I think about, T-shaped teams in engineering or teams inside a retail store, they're a mix of people and skills and personalities, right? It's quite hard to get right. And I wonder where AI is going to play into that. What kind of people should be working with what kind of people in my organization, right? To optimize the team forms. Is there something that AI is going to help us understand the dynamics of people, much like psychometric tests used to do in the old days? And psychometric tests and those things, are they going to fall away the wayside through AI? I don't know where that's going to go, but there's something in that mix of people and chemistry and skills that AI might help us define better teams that work and produce better outcomes. It's going to be
So Jason, there's something to that. There's companies like Human Intelligence that utilize kind of the 4-quadrant methodology, but that's not really AI. And so can AI take that further and say, thinking beyond this, what are we not seeing? Who should be working together, and things like that. And it's, I mean, we're slowly getting there. I think we'll see a rapid improvement, within the next 18 months for sure.
Well, the next generation. Oh, sorry,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm fascinated by what you're doing at SpokePhone. I mean, I love hearing about that.
I think the next generation of AI is going to be AI that knows that produces data you didn't know you need to ask the question for. Because the flaw with it right now is, I need to know the question I need to ask and also how to ask it. So the next generation, 2 generations away, is going to be insightful, right? So have you thought about this information? There's a couple of companies already working on that right now. It'd be interesting to see where they get to. But the Myers-Briggs of the world, right? What are Myers-Briggs thinking about AI, right? And
Right.
how those tests relate, and even do they relate anymore?
That's right. So, Letitia, we had a couple of questions. Do we want to address those quickly, or?
Yeah, I just want to, before we go to the questions that the attendees are sending us, there's something that I wanted to, because we're talking about the future and it sounds very bright and very exciting. But one thing that I wanted to discuss with you is, when we're, and we even hear a lot about that when we're talking to customers here at Pipefy, like some concerns and some risks that they see. Most of them are obviously around security, like to your point, they have someone like listening to my calls and having access to, like, where is that data going, like where is it coming from, where is it going, and also around bias, right, for promotions, for hiring, for all of that, the concern of transferring the human bias to those intelligent agents. How do you guys see that? Like, what do you think are the biggest risks when adopting this type of technology in HR?
Right. So for the vendors out there who are selling software that includes AI, right? You know what your blockers are. Your blockers are going to be legal, compliance, HRIS, or IT, and occasionally marketing, and for good reasons, right? What are the legal ramifications of having AI in your software that does some sort of selection process? And so we've talked about this a little bit before there's a law, NYC 144, which is a statute for the local area of New York City, that basically says you cannot have AI that is biased in the way it does candidate selection or matching based on job descriptions versus resumes. And the onus is on the vendor to prove that there is no bias in that process. Now, there's an audit process that the vendors can do. They get a license that is good for a certain number of employers who use their product to prove, in the case of a lawsuit, that yes, there's no bias in our process. But I feel like the way that the audits are conducted are a little iffy. the requirements or rules that we have to say what is bias and what is not are not very well solidified or thought out yet. So there's that. And then the other thing is, you can't just use AI to write, for instance, job descriptions or HR documents, because, like we said earlier, chatbots use flowery language, and very often they use words that your company has already deemed bias. And so I'm currently working on a project for the largest financial institution in the world, rewriting their job descriptions. And we can't rely on OpenAI or ChatGPT to do it, because there's a list of maybe 100 terms that are considered bias and not, inclusive, and that OpenAI will write into job descriptions. So you have to give OpenAI or any chatbot or AI your list of terms and your list of rules, and you have to be pretty good at writing those rules. And so one of these questions was, how in an HR function do you start adopting these practices if you don't have anyone that's currently an expert? And so my suggestion there is, you hire a specialist, right? Whether it be an outside consultant or hire someone internally, and then start developing those skills within your organization, because it's only going to get more tricky. and this is not going to not proliferate. It's going to get bigger and more important.
Yeah, like I think there's way easier things for HR to start with than going after applications and hiring, right?
Yeah.
There are many, many functions and service delivery improvements you can make with AI in the HR team and the HR service that delivers to the organization, without going anywhere near bias, without going anywhere near selection, right? So I think start small. If I was a vendor in this space right now, I wouldn't be touching that with a barge pole right now. I mean, over the years, we've seen things like DMT. We've seen all different ways that we've tried to stop bias, but bias is something that occurs consciously or unconsciously at some point in the process. I actually think the other is going to occur, which is we will be able to get AI to a point where it removes bias, right? And it will take time. But if you think logically through the process, right, bias comes in when good people don't have good days, right? When different people don't follow processes. Well, AI doesn't have bad days. It doesn't not follow processes. It doesn't not, work in the way that you want it to. But it's going to take time to get there. In terms of the IS security and all those things, I think those answers have been answered already by people in the industry, but it's going to take a long time for corporate IS and IT to get comfortable with those things, like private LMs and data on site doesn't leave my building. There's a lot of ways to circumvent some of those things, but it's going to take a long time to come up with them. So I would suggest you start your AI journey with small goals and small functions to relieve time from your biggest resource, which is people, and have those people in your HR team focus on more valuable things supporting the business. And that's the way to get into that. I think, job descriptions, the problem with AI, it's very confident. So it can be very confident incorrectly. And the training or the ability, the way that you write the instruction to AI is important. I think over time that will become less so, because I'm already seeing platforms trying to solve the problem of content The problem with content, you can imagine in your business, right? You've probably got Zendesk for support tickets. You've probably got a HR manual over here. You've got something, there's typically information in, 12, 19 places. And every time you change something, it's got to be updated in all those places. Well, AI is another place, right? So I think there's a call for a centralized content library for organizations that, if I change my HR policy, well, it updates the document, it updates AI, it updates the website and wherever else it needs to go. But we're seeing a couple of AI tools that are trying to approach that by putting documents into classes of content for AI. So for instance, you in this bucket called Q&A, you write your Q&A content. In this bucket called rules, you write your rules content. And they've tried to break up the pieces of content in battle cards, like a typical sales battle card, which is typically a tweet and a bit of a description. And it forces you to think about the way in which you train people. And training the AI is actually no different than training a new employee in your company. Here's all the rules, here's the things to think about. The difference is when you put this content in these buckets, AI is able to infer those things. So in Craig's example, in the financial example, well, the rules of discriminatory phrases and technology is just the no-say list, right? It's the things to avoid. So we're starting to see that actually come together, and you think about that, that's a private LM, right? It's an internal language model that you're building for your AI. The question becomes an IS question, like, where do you keep this data, right? Is it SharePoint? Is it Google? Is it Confluence? All of these things have problems, and I think there's actually tools that need to be written for that specific purpose around managing that content. So I think, in my mind, done correctly, discrimination through the application process, I think, will get less. And I also think people that have a lower set of skills will have more opportunity to come through and rise to the top with things like crosswalking and other team fit metrics in the future. It's a long way off, but again, start small, start removing those jobs that take up time and frustrate people, so your people can focus on supporting the business in different ways.
Jason, this point you bring about like starting small, starting simple. I wanted to double click on that. And we actually have a question from one of our attendees that I'm guessing that's going to be part of your answer. So I wanted to tackle that one. So someone asked, what would your advice be to mid-level managers who are responsible for executing on the change management to implement AI in their HR practice from leadership, but they have managers who are still in the learning phase themselves?
Yeah, it's no different than anything else, right? I think the problem with AI is surrounded by mystery. Craig made a point about getting compliance and sign off and auditing. The reality is we don't have anyone that's really an expert on AI and HR and policy, right? And that extends to a lot of areas. And then there's this bit of a mystery around AI, right? Is this really going to be the end of the world? Some people think, right? So you have to take people on the journey, right? Which in my mind is, you have to bring people along on that journey by maybe showing them very simple things. And you're not going to be able to start with the biggest, most impactful thing. The who's right in the rules and regulations, I think we'll see stupid rules before we see something that is effective, right? Because in time, when people are in doubt, there's just big stamped rules that come on these things. So just don't even try it until you get further down the track. So in terms of like, how do you bring people along this journey with you? Maybe it's external people to help you talk about that conversation. It's always hard talking about that conversation internally, but try with something simple that's meaningful, right? You've all got HR policy manuals, right? You've all got things questions that people ask. If you just took your HR policy manual and all the FAQs, go back through your email of all the questions that your employees answer, and put that into a database for your LM model, you'll probably find that 75 to 80% of basic employee queries that come to your department every day can be answered sensibly, and you start getting that trust and that proof. And you don't have to build anything. You've already got manuals, right? You've already got this content. It's not like a big lift. You can probably knock out a big chunk of time and energy and get buy-in for more investment to go and tackle other things. So take a look at the assets that you have right now and the things that you do, and get buy-in for more investment and risk, as you go forward.
So I'll pile on to that a little bit with the thought that you can start creating small exercises for your managers to experiment with, right? Non-essential data utilized to simplify tasks. And I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I did along with my book, Hiring Humans, was create a workbook of technology vendors and what they do and how to sort of cross search their functionalities. And I did it by exporting my email list from my calendar. All right, so I looked at all of my calendar entries and I found all of the ones where I did a demo of some software. And so I took all of those emails. So Craig at talentnetlive.com, if I did a demo for someone, that would be on the list. And I fed the list of email addresses into my custom GPT. So I create a custom GPT for everything. So it's not just going into OpenAI, but a custom GPT. And I said, find all of the companies where all of these employees work by their email extensions and write me a spreadsheet of the companies, the contact, what the company does, what other softwares that it could interact with, right? And give me links, hot links to those companies. And I'm able to cut and paste directly into a spreadsheet, and that becomes my cool tools workbook. Now, this sounds like, oh, that's simple, that's a no-brainer, but it takes some customization, it takes some refining, but it's a really good, simple way to start getting people used to. And so I had my whole team do that exercise as well. And we created an amazing vendor list. But it's just it's thinking outside the box a little bit. It's not thinking of the traditional things that you might use a GPT for. And so, these things can be fun, and these exercises that you can build to bring your team along can be entertaining.
Well, that's a really good suggestion, Craig, because I'm just thinking back to how I got started, and it's exactly that, which is take something you do and ask ChatGPT to do it, and then you're going to get it wrong, and you ask it 3 different ways, and eventually you end up with a model that works. And so maybe what you do is go give all your midline managers a $20 a month budget for ChatGPT and get them to do one of their jobs a day in it. One summary write-up, one this, one that, whatever it is, just start playing with it. Maybe it's just job descriptions. And maybe it's reviewing an email train, or maybe it's reviewing some conversation like, hey, ChatGPT, you are my discriminatory advisor that reviews resumes and makes sure my process, blah, 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 right? And just start playing with the prompts to get summarizations of things that people said or didn't say or should have said. So some examples of what we're doing at SpokePhone with that post-call summary is exactly that, right? So you think about, imagine I had a recruiting phone call with a candidate and a line manager. There are several things that the line manager wants from that. There's several things that me and HR want from that. There's several things that my compliance department want. So imagine running a summarization that said, hey, chat, you are my note taker and summary. Write me a summary of the conversation we had with this candidate, the next actions and recommendations and the technologies that I use, right? Whatever it is, and just bullet point summary. I'm going to copy and paste that into bull form. But then the next one might be summarize this conversation from a compliance and discrimination perspective, highlighting things that we should say from our manual that we didn't say during this conversation, right? So you can use it in the negative. So we have a customer in SpokePhone that wants to make sure that they say the right disclaimers. They're a financial brokerage company, right? I want to make sure people aren't overselling. There's been this big backlash, for instance, inside banks, where banks are trying to upsell you when you get a mortgage to insurance and these other things, and it's been deemed illegal in Australia. So we want to make sure that people aren't confused about the things they're hearing, right? So, hey, summarize the intent of this conversation and highlight all the people during the past 6 months that have been confused by a product offering, etc. There's a thousand different things. So maybe that approach is, yeah, give your managers $20 a month and get them to do one thing a week, one job. I mean, I don't know about you, Craig, but I probably use ChatGPT 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And it's my 80% kickstart on any topic, any project, right?
Yeah.
It gets 80% down the road, and then you fix the 20% to make it your own. And from everything to writing an email to blog content to, we have our product multilingual. So if the guys, want to add something else, we say, hey, ChatGPT, you're a product specialist, and you write me phrases for our application in these 5 languages, build me a table of translation strings. And you literally hit copy and paste it into Confluence, and it's done. So there are 100 different uses for it. And I think you'll find that if you can get your managers to use it to save their own time, they'll start understanding how it can be used in their processes outside that time.
Thank you. That was very insightful. Before we go to the next question, which is the final one, I want to kind of like use that as the final remarks because we're almost out of time. I just wanted to tackle one more question that we got from the audience. So someone is curious to know, what are the main KPIs that your HR teams are being measured on?
Yeah. So one of the main things that I see on a regular basis is, so I think trouble tickets are a big problem, right? What's your backlog of ticketing? And I think it's interesting because Pipefy is really good at solving some of that, kind of ticketing issue because it draws from so many sources. But then the other thing that I think is really important is employee engagement. We have these net promoter scores, and we survey our people on a regular basis and say, hey, do you like working here, and would you recommend it? And so, that's a quality standard right there. And I think KPIs like that are very common.
What's interesting, Pipefy actually has a NPS platform built into Pipefy's Kanban board, so as people move across the process, so you can have a NPS score go out from a candidate perspective, from an internal review perspective. I think the KPIs are going to change, over time. For me, if I'm implementing AI, a KPI for my team is going to be, we have to have one AI bot this year where our employees prefer using that bot than contacting HR. If you drive that as a high level objective for your team, because it's not just about, KPIs of reducing the number of tickets, that will happen anyway. But what are the higher level non-functional things that you can implement that actually make a material change to your business? Because remember, AI is, again, it's not about reducing cost, although it will reduce cost. It's what can you do with that extra time and resource, and how are you going to help the business achieve its goal? I think those are the things that I'd be thinking about. But certainly tickets, time to reply, satisfaction outcomes, all of those things, in my view, are going to be massively improved by AI for all of those low-level repetitive functions that, frankly, your people don't want to do. They leave them to the end of the day because it's not interesting. You will solve a lot of the internal grumbling with some very simple tools.
Yeah, in recruiting, we say take the non-recruiting activities off the recruiter's desk and leave them to do the thing they're supposed to be doing the best, which is relationship building. And you can do that in every department, right? So the repetitive things that, very often you're paying a VP level person to do some of these repetitive things that shouldn't be part of their every day, because they are staying up till or working till 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock to get that done. And what kind of quality of life is that? Some people thrive on that, but I think that's going to change.
I think the final point I'd make here is AI is not just about recruiting, right? What about the HR, the job of HR in a business? Yeah, recruiting is one piece of it, right? But actually your job is to make people's careers better, make more efficient output for the company through the HR policies and practices. And to me, thinking about how AI is going to help do that across your business is really where HR provides strategic value into the business.
Thank you, guys. We are almost out of time, so I just wanted to go to the last question, which is, I guess, sort of like closing remarks as well, like your final thoughts on this. What we have here is basically, in the last couple of years, we have been talking a lot about people analytics. Now there's all of this hype around AI. So where do you guys see HR technology moving towards? You did address that a little bit when we were talking about the benefits, and you were like painting the picture of where you see AI going, but overall, like, what's like the final message and like final advice of people? And I noticed we have a lot of HR leaders here. I was looking at the attendees list. What kind of like final advice would you leave them with when it comes to technology in HR and like what they should be paying attention to?
So we are sitting on a massive amount of data that we don't really do much with, from years of hiring and employing, good people or firing bad people. And we don't use it well enough to make informed decisions, but now we really can. So things like succession planning and, real internal mobility and things that we talk about, right? Or being a more diverse company. We have the data to actually take action on that now. And the AI in our business will help us summarize and take action on those things. And tell us what's interesting about that data.
Yeah, it's I think there's a couple of thoughts there. The reality is that HR tech has been a very hot space for a long time, and every year ERE, there's some new thing, and every 50% of the companies are talking about it, right? It was data lakes, big data, ML, blah, 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 chatbots, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
AI is actually not like that. Most of those things were, and our company was probably guilty of it as well back in the day, hanging on the next term to get the next conversation, right? AI actually has the ability to materially change the output and the human condition, and it's going to take some time. It's moving very, very rapidly, and the stuff we're talking about today will be pointless tomorrow. But it will get to a point where it is a true, much like the Industrial Revolution, I think it's going to be a true change in the human condition when it relates to work and life and balance. And just don't expect it to happen overnight. Tackle the easy things first that make difference, and focus on removing those repetitive, low value things, because it will make immediate impact in your business, and it'll get you the budget and the time to actually do the rest of it right.
Thank you so much for the two of you. This has been really insightful. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure that the people attending here also enjoyed this a lot. Thank you both so much for your time, for being on board for this conversation. Everyone attending, as I mentioned in the beginning, we will send you all the recording, so you'll have access to this. You can refer back to all the content whenever you want to. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, Jason and Craig.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Good to see you.
Bye.